All right, so for this deep dive, let's start somewhere really specific. A parking garage, 3 a.m., back in 2017.
Right.
There's a Stanford grad student, Zachary Burton, running, terrified. He genuinely believes evil people are chasing him.
A full psychotic break.
Yeah,
Utterly terrifying, losing touch with reality like that.
exactly. And then 11 days later, he gets a diagnosis,
I-
bipolar disorder.
And that diagnosis, initially anyway, it wasn't relief for him. It was overwhelming shame.
That stigma.
Yeah, the fear of that mark of disgrace is such a huge part of this whole conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But his story and, so many others like it, they really force us to face something important.
Which is?
You're not alone. It sounds simple, but it's profound. People living with these conditions, they aren't some separate group. They're our siblings, our friends, our coworkers.
That's really the heart of it, isn't it? And it sets up our mission today perfectly. We need to get grounded quickly in the fundamentals. What does abnormal behavior actually mean?
Mm-hmm.
Where do these conditions come from, the etiology? And, how good are the systems we use to classify them? The goal is for you, listening, to walk away really informed on these core ideas.
And the first big hurdle is just that definition. What is abnormal behavior? It sounds straightforward, but it's really, really not. Most people think, oh, it's just being weird or different.
Right. But if abnormal just meant atypical, statistically uncommon, well then elite athletes like Patrick Mahomes or Simone Biles with her incredible talent, they'd be abnormal.
And that obviously makes no sense. That definition just falls apart immediately.
So what do clinicians actually use? What are the criteria to say, okay, this behavior warrants attention versus just being, unusual?
Generally, clinicians look for three main things. And this is important. You only need one of these criteria to be met. Often you see two or three, but one is enough.
Okay. What's the first one?
The first is that the behavior is deviant.
Deviant, meaning?
Meaning it strays pretty far from what's considered acceptable within a person's culture or society. The source material used the example of someone washing their hands, say, 7 times an hour.
Okay, yeah. That sounds unusual.
It deviates from the norm for hygiene.
No.
But
there's always a but, isn't there? Context matters.
exactly, context is everything. If that same person washing their hands 7 times an hour is, I don't know, a researcher in a lab handling dangerous live viruses,
Then it's completely normal, necessary even.
precisely, the social context dictates the standard. So deviance alone isn't always enough without context.
Got it. Okay, what's the second criterion?
The second is maladaptive.
Maladaptive.
Yeah, behavior that interferes with the person's ability to function effectively in the world. It gets in the way of daily life.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Imagine someone genuinely believes their breathing contaminates the air and could harm others. They might go to extreme lengths to avoid people, isolate themselves. Maybe they can't go to work, can't maintain relationships. That behavior disrupts their life significantly. It's maladaptive.
Right. It actively prevents them from living a functional life. And what if the behavior isn't obvious to others or doesn't stop them working?
That brings us to the third one. Personally distressful.
Okay.
This is when the individual finds the behavior or the thoughts and emotions connected to it deeply troubling over a significant period.
So it's about the internal experience.
Exactly. Think about someone with bulimia
Yeah.
who secretly purges after meals. Maybe no one else knows. It's not deviant in public view. It might not stop them from succeeding at work, but internally.
Internally, they're experiencing intense shame, guilt, emotional pain over a long time.
Right. That's personal distress. So deviant, maladaptive, or personally distressful. Just one of those is technically enough.
Okay, that clarifies the what. Now the really complex part, the why. What causes these disorders? The etiology. It seems like different fields have fought over this for ages.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You've historically had these different lenses, each sort of claiming to have the main answer.
Like the biological approach, the medical model.
Yeah, that's the big one. Focuses on internal, organic causes, brain structures, genetics, neurotransmitter imbalances. I mean, the whole way the American Psychiatric Association organizes its diagnostic manual, the DSM, is fundamentally built on this biological framework.
But then you have the complete opposite, almost.
Right, the psychological approach. This looks at experiences, thoughts, emotions, personality, things like childhood experiences, trauma, learned behaviors, cognitive patterns, coping styles.
And the third main view.
The sociocultural approach. This one zooms out and looks at the larger social context. How do things like poverty, discrimination, gender roles, ethnicity, or even historical moments shape what's seen as disordered?
Like the example of the suffragists being labeled mentally ill.
Exactly. Their behavior was deviant, because it challenged the social power structure of the time. It shows how societal norms define what's acceptable. Think about smoking in the 1960s versus now.
Definitions change. But the really big shift in understanding recently is that it's not just one of these things, right?
Absolutely. The modern view really rejects those single-cause explanations. We now talk about the biopsychosocial model.
Bio, psycho, social, all interacting.
Precisely. It's about the interplay. It acknowledges that biology, psychology, and social factors are all constantly weaving together. It's not purely a chemical imbalance or purely bad parenting or purely societal pressure.
Which helps explain why, say, two people might have a similar genetic predisposition or similar difficult childhoods, but only one develops a disorder.
Exactly. The interaction is key. Which leads us straight into another really crucial concept for understanding risk,
Which is?
the vulnerability stress hypothesis. You might also hear it called the diathesis stress model.
Okay, vulnerability stress, break that down.
So vulnerability or diathesis refers to some kind of pre-existing condition or predisposition. That could be genetic, could be related to temperament, maybe early life adversity, childhood trauma.
So like a susceptibility.
Right. And then the stress part refers to stressful life experiences or circumstances, environmental triggers.
Like losing a job, a relationship ending, a major life change.
Exactly. The model proposes that it's the combination of that underlying vulnerability and encountering significant stress that can trigger the onset of a psychological disorder. Neither one alone necessarily does it.
It's the interaction. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we have these complex causes. Now, how do we actually classify the disorders themselves? You mentioned the DSM earlier.
Right, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. The current version is the DSM-5-TR, text revision, approved in 2022 by the APA.
Why do we even need such a detailed classification system?
Well, there are good reasons. First, it provides a common language for clinicians and researchers. If one psychologist diagnoses someone with, say, major depressive disorder, another psychologist anywhere else knows exactly what cluster of symptoms that refers to.
Standardization.
Yes. It helps in communication, in research, in predicting the likely course of a disorder. And importantly, for the person receiving the diagnosis, sometimes just having a name for what they're experiencing can bring a sense of relief, of understanding.
But the DSM gets a lot of criticism, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely. A major critique is that it leans too heavily on that medical model we talked about.
Focusing too much on biology.
Critics argue it pathologizes normal human struggles sometimes, and it often neglects or downplays the role of social and environmental factors, like poverty, trauma, discrimination, by framing everything as an internal disease.
And it focuses only on problems, right? Not strengths.
That's another criticism, yeah. It's deficit-focused. It doesn't really have a way to account for resilience or positive attributes.
But hang on, wasn't framing these as medical issues historically important? Didn't it help move things away from, moral failings or demonic possession?
Absolutely. That medical framing was crucial for legitimizing these conditions, for driving research, for reducing some older forms of stigma. It's kind of a double-edged sword.
So it's an ongoing tension.
It is. And the APA does revise it, trying to address these things. Take the recent change from somatoform disorder to somatic symptom disorder.
Okay, what was the significance of that change?
Well, the old somatoform diagnosis basically implied the person had physical symptoms, but with no identifiable physical cause.
Which sounds like telling someone it's all in your head.
Exactly. And patients often found that incredibly invalidating, even insulting. The new definition, somatic symptom disorder, shifts the focus. It emphasizes the distress the person feels, the excessive thoughts, feelings, or behaviors related to their physical symptoms, regardless of whether a medical cause is found or not.
So it validates the psychological suffering about the symptoms.
Precisely. It's a subtle but important shift away from dismissing the physical experience towards acknowledging the mental anguish it causes.
Okay. Before we look at some specific disorders, two quick terms we should define for people listening: comorbidity and risk factors.
Sure, comorbidity is pretty straightforward. It just means having two or more psychological disorders at the same time, like someone might have both anxiety and depression, or depression and a substance use disorder. It's quite common.
Got it. And risk factors.
Risk factors are characteristics or conditions that are statistically associated with a higher likelihood of developing a disorder. Things like a family history of disorder, low socioeconomic status, experiencing trauma.
But crucial point, they're correlations, not necessarily direct causes, right?
Exactly. Correlation does not equal causation. Just because something is a risk factor doesn't mean it causes the disorder, or that everyone with that risk factor will develop it.
Okay, good distinction. Let's dive into a specific category now. Neurodevelopmental disorders. These usually show up in childhood and are linked to brain development. Let's start with autism spectrum disorder, ASD.
Right. ASD is defined by two core sets of features. First, persistent difficulties in social communication and social interaction across various contexts.
Okay. And the second?
Second is restricted, repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, or activities.
And the key word there is spectrum, isn't it?
Hugely important. It covers an enormous range of presentations. You have individuals who need significant support in daily life, and you have others who are incredibly high-achieving, like the scientist Temple Grandin, whose unique cognitive style is actually an asset in her field. The level of support needed varies massively.
There's also been a shift in language recently.
Yes, towards identity-first language, like autistic person rather than person with autism, preferred by many in the community. It reflects autism as an integral part of identity, not something separate.
And let's address the causes, or rather the non-causes, because there's so much misinformation.
Yeah, we really need to be clear here. The scientific consensus is overwhelming. Specific parenting styles do not cause autism. And emphatically, vaccines do not cause autism.
That myth persists so strongly, though.
It does. And it's a textbook example of what psychologists call illusory correlation.
Illusory correlation.
It's when people perceive a relationship between two things simply because they happen close together in time, especially if they are vivid or emotionally charged events. Like a child getting a vaccine around the same time, parents start noticing developmental differences.
The brain mistakenly links them causally, even though there's no actual connection.
Exactly. The timing creates a false impression of cause and effect.
Okay, that's a really helpful concept. Let's move to another major neurodevelopmental disorder. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD.
Right. ADHD involves a persistent pattern of inattention and/or hyperactivity impulsivity.
Key symptoms being trouble focusing, being easily distracted, restlessness, acting impulsively.
Yes, and crucially, these symptoms need to be present before age 12, occur in multiple settings like both home and school, and interfere with functioning.
What's the leading idea about what's happening in the brain with ADHD?
A prominent theory is the delimaturation hypothesis. This suggests that certain brain areas, particularly the prefrontal cortex,
Which is responsible for planning, decision-making, impulse control.
exactly, that executive function hub. The idea is that this area develops more slowly in individuals with ADHD compared to their peers.
Which would explain the difficulties with focus and self-regulation.
It provides a neurological basis for those characteristic challenges.
Now, here's the thing that often catches people off guard. The treatment. We often treat hyperactivity with stimulants, like Ritalin or Adderall. That seems paradoxical.
It does seem counterintuitive, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Using a stimulant to help someone who's hyperactive sit still and focus.
So why does it work?
It's about regulating brain chemistry. These stimulant medications actually increase the levels of certain neurotransmitters, particularly dopamine, in the brain pathways associated with attention and control.
Okay.
By boosting dopamine availability, especially in the prefrontal cortex, the medication helps improve the brain's ability to filter distractions, sustain attention, and inhibit impulsive behavior. Sort of fine-tunes the system.
So it's providing the chemical support needed for better self-regulation, reducing the need for the person to seek external stimulation through constant activity.
That's a good way to put it, yes. It helps the brain regulate itself more effectively.
Understanding the clinical side is vital. But as soon as a diagnosis like ASD or ADHD or bipolar disorder like Zachary Burton is made, we leave the clinic and enter the real world, where stigma is a massive issue.
A devastating issue. And it's often fueled by these high-profile, horrific events we see in the news. Mass shootings, for instance. The perpetrators, people like James Holmes, Adam Lanza, Nicholas Cruz, are often reported as having histories of mental health issues.
Which creates this powerful link in the public mind. Psychological disorder equals violence.
An incredibly damaging and, frankly, wrong stereotype. It's that illusory correlation, again, the rare, shocking event, completely overshadows the everyday reality.
What is the reality?
The reality, backed by research, is that people with psychological disorders, especially those who are receiving treatment, are no more likely to be violent than the general population.
No more likely.
No. In fact, the data shows they are significantly more likely to be the victims of violence than perpetrators.
That's a critical point that gets lost. And this prejudice, this fear, it has real consequences in everyday interactions.
Absolutely. There was a study mentioned in the source material that showed this really clearly. College students were asked to choose a project partner.
Okay.
When the potential partner was described as having a control condition or even panic disorder, about 90% of the students chose to work with them on the same topic. Pretty standard collaboration.
But what happened when the label changed?
When the potential partner was described as having schizophrenia, less than half the students chose the same topic.
Wow, less than half, just based on that one word, schizophrenia.
A staggering drop. It demonstrates powerful, active social avoidance based purely on the diagnostic label. It brings us right back to Zachary Burton's shame. It wasn't just internal, it was anticipating that kind of rejection and judgment.
And this avoidance, this fear of being judged, creates a real bind, doesn't it? The source calls it a catch-22.
It really is a catch-22. Here's how it works. People who are actually managing their condition well, who are functioning, often hide their diagnosis. Why? For fear of exactly that kind of stigma, discrimination in housing, jobs, relationships.
So the positive examples, the role models showing that recovery and a good life are possible, they stay hidden.
Exactly. They remain invisible. And because the public doesn't see those positive examples easily, the negative stereotypes and prejudices, often fueled by those rare violent cases, persist.
Which reinforces the fear, making people even less likely to disclose. And the cycle continues.
Precisely. It's a vicious cycle fueled by fear and invisibility.
So let's try to pull these threads together for you, the listener. We've seen that abnormal isn't just being different. It's about deviation from norms, maladaptive functioning, or personal distress, all within a context.
And we've seen that the causes are complex, that biopsychosocial interplay, the vulnerability stress idea, it's rarely just one thing.
We've also tackled classification, why systems like the DSM exist, their uses, but also their very real limitations and the significant problem of stigma they can unfortunately reinforce.
And you now have the grounding to understand that these aren't rare conditions affecting other people. Almost 1 in 5 adults in the U.S. experiences a psychological disorder in any given year. These are common human experiences.
Understanding the concepts, the science, it helps cut through the fear, the misinformation.
Hopefully.
So we ended on that catch-22. People hide their struggles because of stigma, which means positive role models are hidden, which means stigma persists.
Yeah.
So here's the final thought to maybe mull over. If more contact with people who are coping well with a disorder is what actually helps reduce prejudice, but the fear of that prejudice prevents people from being open.
How can society, not just therapists, but all of us, help create an environment where people feel safer? Safe enough to maybe be more open if they choose, and in doing so, help break that cycle? What small things could shift that dynamic in our own lives, our own communities?